The cause of death was listed as a single gunshot wound to the chest. However, the medical examiner disagreed upon closer inspection of the entry wound and subsequent analysis of the scene's ballistic trajectory patterns. The postmortem interval was estimated at 12 hours based on the body's temperature and rigor mortis stage. However, this initial assessment proved inaccurate when further evidence indicated a longer duration since death. Upon examination, the entry wound exhibited characteristics consistent with a gunshot fired from a distance less than 1 meter, suggesting close-range contact. Microscopic analysis of tissue samples revealed stippling around the wound margins, confirming the discharge pattern indicative of such proximity. Additionally, trace amounts of gunpowder residue were found on the deceased's clothing near the wound site. The medical examiner's hypothesis was supported by environmental factors and physical evidence at the scene, which suggested a more prolonged period between the fatal incident and discovery. Ballistic trajectory analysis confirmed that the bullet's path aligned with the angle of entry observed in the autopsy findings, further corroborating the initial assessment of close-range firing. Chapter: Case background. On the evening of March 14th, a resident of Oakwood Apartments reported an unusual noise to local law enforcement. The caller described hearing what sounded like a loud bang coming from apartment 3B around 9:15 p.m. Upon arrival at the scene, officers found the front door slightly ajar and observed signs of forced entry near the living room window. Inside, they discovered the deceased lying on the floor in a pool of blood with a single gunshot wound to the chest. A spent cartridge casing was located approximately 3 feet from the body. Initial assumptions suggested a possible break-in gone wrong, but further investigation revealed no evidence of theft or disturbance elsewhere in the apartment, indicating that the entry may have been staged. The exact sequence of events leading up to the shooting remained unclear until a thorough examination of the bullet trajectory provided crucial insights into the nature and timing of the incident. Chapter: Initial findings upon arrival at the scene. First responders noted a single male individual lying supine on the living room floor of an otherwise undisturbed residence. The deceased exhibited no visible signs of external injury or trauma, aside from a small entry wound approximately 2 centimeters in diameter, located centrally on the right side of the thoracic cavity, just inferior to the 5th rib. No exit wound was immediately apparent upon cursory examination. Initial medical assessment by emergency personnel classified the manner of death as undetermined pending further investigation. The body was positioned with arms slightly abducted and legs partially flexed at the hips and knees, consistent with post-mortem rigidity. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle within the immediate vicinity of the deceased's location. The presence of a single gunshot wound necessitated an in-depth forensic analysis to determine if any other contributing factors might have influenced the shooting scenario. The decision was made to transport the body to the medical examiner's office for a thorough autopsy and ballistics evaluation, with priority given to establishing the trajectory of the projectile relative to the entry wound observed on the deceased's thorax. The presence of a single gunshot wound necessitated an in-depth forensic analysis to determine if any other contributing factors might have influenced the shooting scenario. Chapter: Forensic investigation. At the crime scene, investigators meticulously documented a single entry wound on the anterior chest region of the deceased, consistent with firearm discharge based on stippling patterns and powder residue analysis. A .45 caliber cartridge case was recovered from the floor adjacent to the exit point on the back, indicating close-range contact. Swab samples were collected for trace evidence, including fibers and soil that may provide environmental context or indicate movement prior to discharge. Notably absent were any signs of forced entry or struggle, suggesting a premeditated encounter. All items were cataloged with unique identifiers, placed in sealed evidence bags, and secured under the control of the lead detective, ensuring an unbroken chain of custody throughout processing at the forensic laboratory for further analysis. The laboratory analysis commenced with the assessment of bullet fragments recovered from the vicinity of the entry wound and surrounding tissue samples. Utilizing scanning electron microscopy, SEM, and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, EDS, we identified elemental compositions indicative of a specific caliber ammunition, corroborating the trajectory pattern observed at the scene. Histological sections revealed lacerations consistent with high-velocity impact, confirming the presence of metallic debris within tissue planes as evidenced by microanalysis. Quantitative polymerase chain reaction, qPCR, was employed to detect residual gunshot residue, GSR, yielding positive results with a detection threshold of 10 ng per sample. Tissue samples adjacent to the entry wound exhibited macroscopic and microscopic patterns consistent with cavitation and crush injury, aligning with the ballistic trajectory analysis. Forensic evidence, including bullet trajectory analysis and entry wound patterns, suggested a single gunshot event. Trajectory indicated a downward angle from the victim's head to torso, consistent with a shot fired from above. Blood spatter patterns and residue on the weapon handle supported this sequence. Microscopic particles from clothing fibers at the scene were matched to the deceased's garments, corroborating the position of both parties during the incident. Postmortem interval was estimated through entomological examination, revealing specific insect colonization stages consistent with a time frame of approximately 6 hours post-mortem. This estimation aligns with recorded timestamps on electronic devices found nearby. The timeline established by these findings confirmed that the gunshot wound was the direct cause of death and contradicted initial reports suggesting multiple assailants. The entry wound observed on the deceased exhibited characteristics consistent with a gunshot injury from a contact discharge. Microscopic examination revealed stippling and soot deposition around the wound perimeter, indicating close proximity between the firearm and skin at the moment of discharge. Ballistic analysis confirmed that the trajectory of the projectile was aligned with this area, corroborating the physical evidence. The absence of exit wounds or defensive injuries suggested a single-shot incident without significant movement post-impact. Expert testimony would emphasize these findings as critical in establishing both the nature and origin of the gunshot wound. Conclusive evidence, such as stippling patterns and trajectory analysis, leaves little room for alternative interpretations regarding the circumstances of the deceased's death, thereby providing robust support to the investigative narrative. Chapter Resolution: The analysis of ballistic trajectory, in this case, provided definitive evidence regarding the directionality of gunfire that resulted in the deceased's fatal injury. Initial assessments suggested a potential altercation occurring at close range, based on the characteristics of the entry wound and distribution of gunshot residue. However, through meticulous examination of trace evidence, including fiber samples from clothing and paint chips from surfaces impacted by discharged projectiles, it was determined that the shooting occurred from an angle inconsistent with immediate confrontation. Initial assessments suggested a potential altercation occurring at close range, based on the characteristics of the entry wound and distribution of gunshot residue. High-resolution imaging of both the entry wound and exit points, coupled with 3D modeling software to reconstruct the scene, established a clear line of fire originating from a location several meters away. This finding contradicted earlier assumptions about the spatial dynamics of the incident. The central determination was that the deceased sustained a gunshot wound consistent with a single shot fired from an elevated position, indicating premeditation rather than spontaneous violence. This revelation shifted the investigation's focus towards motive and opportunity, highlighting the necessity for comprehensive environmental analysis to corroborate physical evidence in determining both cause and manner of death. Ballistic trajectory analysis, in this case, provided clear evidence of the entry wound's consistency with the suspect's weapon, reinforcing the importance of precise ballistics and corroborative wound pattern analysis. This methodology underscores the necessity for meticulous examination to ensure accurate reconstruction of events. The file remains open,